Savannah, thank you so much for joining us for this interview.
Thank you for having me on Meet the Press.
I'm so excited. Welcome back to Meet the Press.
It's been a while.
I know it has been. Well, it's a special reason that you're here. Your beautiful book, Mostly What God Does. Your first two books were children's books.
Yes.
This is very different. This is very personal. Why did you want to write this book now?
You know, no one is more surprised than me that I wrote a book about anything, let alone about faith and about God. It's definitely the most personal and vulnerable thing I've ever done. And the strangest thing about it is it wasn't something I felt like I had to do or needed to do, that I should do, that I felt like was an obligation because of, you know, the wonderful blessings I've had in life. The strangest thing is that it was something I wanted to do. God made me want to do it. I had something good to say, and I just had to share it.
Well, as someone who's known you for a long time, I have to say one of the most beautiful parts of reading this book is that I hear your voice in every word. Really. I felt like I was sitting with you every time.
For better or worse.
This book. And I think the world gets to hear your voice every morning on TV. But how did you find your written voice, your literary voice?
I love to hear you say that because we are dear friends. And I've had many of my friends say, this is so funny, reading this is like sitting and having coffee with you.
It really is.
Or more likely wine in my case. But, you know, I just wrote my own thoughts. It's really, I tried to make it very simple, very plain, very down to earth, very accessible. It's not a religious tome. I'm the first to put the disclaimer on saying, I'm not a biblical scholar. I'm not a theologian. And I'm not offering myself up as some great example of piety or religious learning. I'm just a regular human who has walked in faith and out of faith over years and years. And these are some of the things that I've learned. And I didn't learn them because everything went well. I learned them mostly when things went wrong, mostly when there were disasters, and disasters often of my own making. And the thrust of the book is very simple. It's simple, but it's not easy. It's called Mostly What God Does. And the rest of the sentence is, mostly what God does is love you. And when I really let that penetrate my heart, it amounted to a total reframing of what faith meant to me. I grew up in a Baptist church. I had a very churchy upbringing. We went to church, like, I'm not kidding, 5 times a week. And there was a lot about that background that I truly treasure to this day. But it also came with a lot of guilt and shame and always wondering if I was good enough, what God thought of me and my choices. And I read this Bible verse years and years ago, retranslated, and what stuck out was that sentence, mostly what God does is love you. And that changed everything for me.
I feel like so many people have the sense that they know you very well, but this is the first time that people are seeing the whole Savannah. And you are very vulnerable in this book because you talk about, as you say, in very real terms, your relationship with your faith, which sometimes has been very strong and sometimes has ebbed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, if you're going to write about a book about faith, you have to tell the truth and you have to reveal something of yourself because faith doesn't happen in a vacuum. You're not standing at some blackboard giving, 10 commandments. I'm certainly not doing that. You learn about faith and you learn about God. And you learn that God loves you, not when things are great, but when things aren't. And so to the extent that I was trying to share what I've learned, I had to show more of myself than, frankly, I'm very comfortable showing. And again, not my moments of great triumph, but my moments of doubt. And also my moments of irreverence. And have you ever wondered why God's always asking us to praise him? What's up with that? Things like that. I just tried to be me. And I think this book is, though it certainly comes from a particular perspective, I grew up in the Baptist church. I hope that it's for anyone, whether you have a lot of faith or you have a lot of doubt. Because what I really believe is that God meets us exactly where we are and that he yearns to engage with us. And the only thing we really have to bring is ourselves, our whole authentic selves.
What do you say, Savannah, to people who, as you say, you are a person of faith, you grew up with God as the 6th member of your household? What do you say to people who feel like they've lost their faith? How do they find it again?
I understand. And I think God understands. We live in a broken world. This is not the world that God intended. And there are hard questions. And I try to talk about those things What I couldn't do, and forgive me in a conversation about faith for saying this, Kristen, I couldn't write a bunch of BS. I wanted to ask those questions. Where is God? Where is God in a world that looks to be full of injustice and despair and suffering? Whether it's what we do in our business by looking at the news every day, or whether it's lives lived where disappointments mount and heartbreak comes and struggle seems constant. I ask those questions. What are we supposed to believe about God? How are we supposed to find him? I don't answer all the existential questions of the universe that are unanswerable. Spoiler alert. If I did, the book would probably be longer and I'd charge more. But I don't think it is a mistake, and I don't think it is a lack of faith to grapple with those doubts. And the number one thing I say is bring those doubts to God. Bring your whole self to God. He's not afraid of our questions.
I find some of the most fascinating moments of your book when you talk about these delightful moments where you share the revelations that you're still having. You say in one moment, when I came across that phrase from Isaiah, garment of praise, it leaped off the page, garment. Suddenly I got it. If praise is a garment, who is wearing it? We are. We are the ones who are adorned. What are those moments of realization like for you, and the fact that you are so familiar with the Bible, but you're still having these revelations?
It's just so fun. You know, faith is a leap. And many people think, oh, faith, this might be something, it's a crutch that you grew up with or something you got emotionally attached to. I do say, in the end, faith is a leap. However, once you're there, it is so intellectually interesting and challenging. And one of my favorite things is to try to learn more about my faith, and the scriptures are so powerful. And there can be things that you've read 1,000 times that suddenly you look at and it's a whole new light. And it's true, when that happens, it buzzes with electricity and recognition and excitement. And you want to tell someone. And that was the joy of doing this book. All these things I had been kind of thinking or writing in my journal about all these years, I got to say out loud. I got to think about. And they weren't just things that I had learned years and years before. It was happening in real time. Writing it was so alive and so thrilling. You know, for a long time, I wasn't even sure this would end up being a book. I was so scared.
Really?
I was so scared to put myself out there. All I thought is, I'll at least try. I'll just start writing. If nothing else, it's a good activity for me and God. I'll have something to show my kids one day in case they ever want to know what mom thought. So I wasn't really sure, but I thought, no matter what happens, hasn't this just been an amazing few months sitting here thinking about these things, pondering these things, and finding that God was right there to meet me with all kinds of new stuff I had never thought about.
It's incredible. The book is a leap of faith. But Savannah, you have had so many leaps of faith in your life. You went to law school and then you decided to get back into journalism. That itself is a leap of faith. Where did you find the strength? And what do you say to people who wrestle with those crossroads in life? Should they take a leap of faith or not? What do you say to them?
Well, you know, I write about this a little bit, and of course, it's a different kind of leap, but I always tell young people, we get to work with a lot of young producers, or I've given graduation speeches, and I always say something similar to anything interesting you do in your life, anything that really stretches you or grows you, it's going to be outside your comfort zone. It's going to be on the other side of a risk. It's on the edge. It's waiting for you, but you're going to have to jump to get there. And I realized with this book, you know, it had been a long time since I had taken my own advice. So I decided that this book was really getting out of my own comfort zone. But I did do it earlier in my career. I worked in television news for 6+ years, decided to scrap it all and go to law school. I went to law school, started working as a lawyer, had a federal clerkship lined up with a wonderful federal judge in Washington, D.C., decided to scrap it all and try to go back to television without a job, a lead, an agent, with nothing. Look, these were risks. You can't take a crazy risk. You can take a calculated risk, and that's what I did. And I do think that there will be times in our lives when we feel that courage, and we have that moment. And my biggest advice is listen to that, because it won't always be there. I knew that if I didn't take those chances when I took those chances, that I'd lose my nerve. So if you feel that call, and you have that little spark of belief, even if you're the only one who believes it, I say go after it.
I know that part of your strength and your Fearlessness comes from your parents, who you write about, and you do write very candidly about one of the most painful times in your life, which is losing your father. At the age of 16, you say, I remember some of my friends asking if I could still believe in God, if his sudden death at the age of 49 had made me doubt my beliefs. No, I said, this is when I need God the most. But Savannah, I think a lot of people still wonder, how were you able to keep your faith and find such a strong relationship with it all these years later, despite such a devastating loss at such a young age?
Well, you know, when I said that to my friends, I was 16 years old, and that was my first reaction. No, I can't give up God. I can't lose my dad and God, not at the same time. But the rest of my life is a story of any kind of relationship where there's been a breach of trust. And when we have things that come to us that are hard, when we have suffering, it is a breach of trust. I write about this. I don't think that God is the author of evil, suffering, and death. This is not the world that he intended. But the fact of the matter is, and this is what's so difficult, this is the crucible of faith. For whatever reasons we cannot possibly understand right now, he does permit it. This world is still going on in a broken way that is full of heartbreak. And it is very understandable to ask, where is God in those moments? And that is what my life has been about, asking those questions. And I think that what I've learned is it is a relationship. And we have to the best of our ability, at least come close to God, draw close, at least give him access to our hearts, because I do believe we find healing there. I can't explain it. This is where the leap of faith comes in. It's beyond words, it's beyond expression, it's beyond intellect. But those who have experienced real grief, and I write about some of them in this book, including a mother who lost her little girl in Newtown. To me, I cannot fathom a grief greater than that, and she's a woman of great faith, and I had to meet her, and I had to speak to her. And what she shared with me that I write about in the book made me understand that while there is great suffering in this world, there is great comfort available to us from God himself, and that this is not how it will end. I believe, and this is my leap of faith, that we will one day have a better world on earth as it is in heaven, the one intended. But until that day, we are asked to believe and just draw close to God and believe that he will draw close to us.
And you're candid, Savannah, about the fact that that comfort, that belief requires work. You're very candid about the moments in your life when you did not feel close to God, when you could not access your faith. You are doing the hard work. You started that very early with Vale by taking her to church. And I love your mom sent the hymns to you to listen to on your CD.
People keep asking me, do your kids go to church? I'm like, yes, I drag them to church in the grand tradition of all of us who were dragged by our ears on Sunday morning. Yes, I do.
And you do the work yourself.
You have to do the work, but you're right, it's very candid. I write about taking not months, not days, not a few weeks, but years in which, yes, I believed in a distant kind of way, but it's not like I was waking up every morning doing Bible study or had some pious practices or was even living a life that I would want to hold up to some religious scrutiny. No, I was a regular person. And there were times in my life where I was disappointed with the way things had turned out, that I probably did blame God, and I just kind of checked out. And what I learned is that it doesn't matter how much we think of God. It does not matter what we think of God. It doesn't change how he thinks about us. It does not matter. It does not change how he treats us. So this is the big, I think, for me, the big aha, the big message of the book is mostly what God does is love you. And his love has nothing to do with our thoughts of him. It has nothing to do with our actions, good or bad. It has nothing to do with who we are. It has everything to do with who he is.
And you say that having children made you understand God's love for you. Yeah. How did that revelation happen, Savannah?
I mean, you know this, being a mom is a revelation in every single way. But spiritually, it really was too. There was a moment when I realized when my daughter was born, of course, this love that was unimaginable to me before, and unlike any other I'd experienced, because it's the closest I think we'll ever come to understanding how God relates to us, because a mother or father's love for their child is unconditional. Again, it doesn't matter how they act. On their worst day, your love is not any different for your daughter. On their worst day, no matter what she does, no matter if she's a snarly teen at 13 and says, I hate you, mommy, you will love her the same. There's not one thing you could do or say for or against that she could do that would make you change your mind about her. When you realize that that's how God feels about us, it's stunning. It's stunningly intimate and tender. It's almost too good to believe. But if you could believe it, if you could let it penetrate even for just a moment, well, it would change everything. It would change everything, and it couldn't be contained. It would have to be spread around. If you could think for 1 minute, God loves me, not because he has to. He likes me. He adores me. He delights in me the way a mom delights in her child, the way we relish over their little accomplishments and their milestones, how we're so over the moon happy when something goes their way and how crushed we are when it doesn't. That is how God feels about us. I am not making this up. The metaphor is all through the scriptures. It's right there. God, our Father, to his children. The verses say, we're God's children, be as dearly loved children, because that is exactly who we are.
Did that change everything for you, the moment that you realized that you really fully understood God's love for you?
It did, because it's hard to imagine that kind of love. There's no other relationship I can imagine as much as I love my parents, my siblings, my husband. It's not exactly unconditional, right? Yes. And maybe it shouldn't be, but your child, it's a whole different category. And I think that, to me, when I really came to grips with that and thought about it, and then this aha moment of, oh, that's how God feels about me and you, and also every single person we meet. And when you walk out of this building today and walk down the street, if you looked everyone in the eye and you thought, God loves them, God adores them just like they adore me. You cover politics. You're in this world every single day. This is hard. I'm not saying this is easy, but your political rival, the one you disagree with so vehemently, if just for a second, just for yourself, you don't have to make a big proclamation. You just looked at them and you looked at them the way you think God might look at them. No judgment, just love. That doesn't mean you don't know when something's wrong. You know when your child does something wrong. You don't gloss over it. You might try to set them straight, but you always love them. And that, I think, is this transformative love. The world is broken. And I'm not Pollyanna here, but if you could first believe, really believe, let it hit you, how much God loves you specifically, you couldn't help but spread it around. And you know what? That might just start changing the world.
That could change the world if everyone could let that into their hearts. Savannah, we are having this conversation as we prepare to celebrate Easter.
Yeah.
What does Easter mean to you, and how do you make sure that it is a day that is filled with faith, even while you're doing the Easter egg hunts
we
and
do it
eating
all.
the big meal?
And every year I'm like, count the eggs, because I'm going to find one in July and it's going to stink. And so we do all the stuff. We got the Easter bunny. It's fun. Why not? But we do go to church, and I do try to remind my kids why this day is so joyous. And it's an interesting metaphor for life, because, of course, in the Christian tradition, Easter is the resurrection, but it comes after a day of darkness, a day of sorrow. But the Sunday morning is so full of joy, because we know what we've lost. We know how dark it can be. So when the light comes, it is magnificent. And that's the joy of Easter.
And just what is your Easter message for everyone, Savannah?
I guess my Easter message is, remember that you are loved. You, specifically. Everything about you. You are loved. You are adored. You are liked. Hold it in your heart, if even for a split second. And if you can do that today, don't forget to do it tomorrow. We all need to be reminded of that every day. It's like, if you get married and you tell your husband on your wedding day, I love you, sweetie. You don't never say it again. You don't say in 30 years, well, I told you that one time. Being loved by God is something that we have to remind ourselves of every single day. We got to soak in it. And so believe it today and get up and try to believe it again tomorrow.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Savannah. Thank you. That was so beautiful.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or follow us on social media.